Jim Monaghan, Chris Swendeman, we're back with the 2 Minute Drill. We have a special guest with us this week. He is the co host of the Sunday Drive on SiriusXM, which runs a whopping 8 hours. Plus, you can
Wow.
hear some other times as well throughout the week on SiriusXM. Bill Lekas, it's a pleasure to have you with us here on the 2 Minute Drill.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I have to ask you, how on earth do you do a 12-hour shift?
Well, they give us pizza, so yeah, that helps. But the games really help. I mean, the games dictate how that show goes. If you have good games, compelling matchups, that really carries it. And it doesn't feel like an 8-hour show. I mean, I'm in there. It's a 9 to 9 day for me. I do that show from in Midtown at the SiriusXM studio. So I leave the house about 9 o'clock and I get home about 9 o'clock at night. And the actual on air is noon to 8 p.m. Eastern time. But the first hour is the only hour where there are not games going on, and maybe the final half hour. And really, you don't know what time it is. You're not paying attention because the games carry it and really make the flow go on that kind of show.
What kind of show prep do you have to put into this?
The show prep is pretty extensive. I usually start in the middle of the week, and you're looking at all the matchups and trying to find different angles for each and every game, because we have all the games on. We're watching all the games. The 12 o'clock hour, we're previewing the 1 o'clock Eastern time games. So it's about individual matchups, whether it's a particular cornerback against a particular wide receiver, a particular defensive end against a particular offensive tackle. It's about what team handles the run better, and this team has a running back that could take advantage of that. It's about how teams do in a red zone and third down percentage. And so you're looking at all of these different stats, all this different data in the matchup to try to come up with who you think could take advantage of the other team in what way.
I should point out, Bill, that my co-host here, Chris Swendeman, is was a longtime Dallas Cowboys fan.
Wow.
You'll notice that he's wearing a Buffalo Bills hat. He finally had enough.
So
I did.
Wait a minute. So you traded in the Cowboys hat and you went to the Buffalo Bills? That was the logical step for you?
It was, because you know what? If I was gonna do this once in my life, this was gonna be the time to do it. And I always growing up, I was a huge fan of Jim Kelly. I have a friend who's kind of affiliated with the organization, and I figured if I'm gonna go quasi local, this is gonna be the team to do it. And I just love the fan base, and it's been the best decision I ever made.
Well, Chris, I'm going to let you know while we're talking, I grew up as a New York Jets fan. So you have it a lot better than I do, but I can't give them up. I'll never give them up.
Jet fans are loyal. I will give them that. All of you long-suffering Jet fans, I give you all the credit in the world, because you have seen and been through everything, and yet you're still standing somehow. And I give you all the credit. You guys should get like some kind of Medal of Honor, really, for all you've been through. You guys really are an amazing fan base, and I'll always give Jet fans credit for that.
I'll make it worse for you. I'm a Jet fan and a Met fan. So I'm in mourning this week anyway, and the Jets don't help take any of the sting away.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, that collapse, Bill, by the Mets was just unbelievable to watch.
Yep. It was tough to take. I don't even call it a collapse, Jim, because this was going on for months. This wasn't like the Tigers, and the Tigers made the playoffs anyway, but this isn't like the Tigers where all of a sudden they fell off a cliff. The Mets were playing bad baseball for months at a time. So this was a 3-month process of them having first place, that being gone, and then the wild card lead being whittled away, and then the final wild card spot not being able to hang on to either. This was a long process, and it was very painful to watch as a fan.
I can imagine. So we're roughly a quarter of the way through the NFL season. What has been one of the biggest surprises for you so far, Bill?
I think the Colts have been a big surprise. The fact that Daniel Jones is playing the way he's playing, the fact that the Colts are 3-1, and I know they're coming off a loss in week 4, but even in that game, in LA on the road. They made it very tough. They had an opportunity to win that game, had some big mistakes. Jones did get picked off a couple of times, but some defensive breakdowns late. The fact that they are a 3-1 team is a massive surprise. And the fact that the Ravens are a 1-3 team is also extremely surprising. Some of that is tied into the injuries. They have a ton of them all over the field. Even Lamar Jackson now with a hamstring. Ronnie Stanley, their left tackle. Nnamdi Madubuike, the defensive tackle. He's out for the year. Roquan Smith, Marlon Humphrey, and the list goes on. So they have a lot of walking wounded over there. That has hurt the Ravens, but they haven't played good football either. Defense has not been good. Running game has not been the same. And the wide receivers, you get them in man-to-man coverage, they have not been able to break loose. And Lamar Jackson's been forced to hold the ball an awful lot. So people had them as a Super Bowl favorite. They're 1-3 out of the gate. And with the injuries, it does not look like it's going to turn around real quick.
Do you think that it hurts Lamar Jackson's legacy and how he's viewed because he cannot beat Mahomes and or Josh Allen?
I think it does. I think Lamar Jackson's in a similar position to, and they're very different quarterbacks now, to where Peyton Manning was at one point, where Peyton Manning was outstanding. His teams did well. His numbers were off the charts, and they couldn't win a Super Bowl, couldn't get to a Super Bowl, which Lamar hasn't either. And a lot of times when he'd have those head-to-head matchups with Tom Brady and the Patriots, he'd come up on the losing end. So I think he's in that area right now. I'll give you a different definition of it, which is closer to home for me. I told you I'm a Mets and a Jets fan. I'm a Knicks fan. So I look at Lamar Jackson right now as Patrick Ewing, trying to get past Michael Jordan with all these great seasons and all these numbers and a Hall of Fame career and not able to get over the hump. And that's kind of where we are right now, at least with Lamar Jackson.
You mentioned Patrick Mahomes, and I'm looking at he had a pretty good weekend this past Sunday, but the Chiefs are 2-2, and they've looked really, really shaky in those first two losses. How concerned should the Chiefs be?
I would say I would have been more concerned a couple of weeks ago. I think they stabilized things in the last couple of weeks. Not the Giant game as much as the Raven game where Mahomes threw the 4 touchdowns. They're getting whole, Jim, and I think that's the big point for them. They got Xavier Worthy back. That makes the offense much more dangerous. It opens things up for the wide receivers on that team with the speed that he brings. In week 7, they'll get Rashee Rice back off the suspension, another wide receiver there. So I think unlike the Ravens, the Chiefs have stabilized the situation. They have taken the early hit, and now they're headed in the right direction. I would not be as concerned about KC as I am about Baltimore.
They're also talking in the last 24 hours or so, Bill. They've been talking. Obviously, NFL finished up first game ever in Dublin, Ireland this weekend with Pittsburgh over Minnesota. Minnesota spending 2 weeks overseas, going back-to-back, first team to ever do it. How close are we to getting a team expansion team overseas, do you think?
I don't know if we're on the verge of getting an expansion team there. I think what comes before that is an expansion of these overseas games. I think we're going to see more and more. The Commissioner Roger Goodell has said as much, where he'd love for every team to play a game over there. And if they eventually expand the season and extend it from 17 to 18 games, which we all know they want to do, I think that's what's going to happen. Every team will play one game overseas at some point. Once we get there, that might be the jumping off point to having a team overseas. But there are a lot of, I think you know this, there are a lot of logistical issues with that. How's the travel going to work out going both ways? So there's some things to iron out before we get to that point. But the first, I think, step is where we are. And then the big leap is to get to every team's playing at least one game overseas throughout the year.
Go ahead,
Chris.
No, and they just announced partnership with Brazil over the next, I believe, 4 or 5 years, guaranteed game in Brazil over and to bring the NFL and more programs with the NFL sponsorship to Brazil and game in Rio next year. But over the next 4 or 5 years, they're going to have a big partnership there as well.
Yes, they are. I mean, they've had Sao Paulo, and they've done that the last 2 years on the Friday night of the first week. So I think it was natural for them to try to play games in Rio, and they're going to look to other markets. I mean, they got to Ireland this year. We've seen a lot of London, Germany, Spain. I think they're going to try as many markets as they think are viable for them. and see what hits, because so far, from the fan standpoint, it's been a tremendous success. I don't know that if I was the Vikings, I'd want to spend back-to-back weeks overseas, especially after they got beaten up by the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't know from a competitive angle if that's the best thing, but for the league, it's worked out very, very well so far.
As the league, obviously is going international. This is a goal I think that Goodell has had for some time. I look to what they just announced with the Super Bowl halftime performance of Bad Bunny, and you look at who he appeals to. I think he's, over the past 5 years, he's been either first, second, or third in terms of streaming artists on Spotify. So a lot of people know who he is, 3-time Grammy Award winner, and obviously with a very, very strong international appeal.
Now, no question about it. Now, my daughter wanted it to be Taylor Swift, so maybe she was disappointed, but I get where you're going, and it makes sense. I think they're looking for every single angle and connection that they can find to get more fans interested. And that's whether it's in the entertainment, in a halftime show, the Super Bowl, or whether it's the actual product on the field. And that's what's going on with a lot of the sports. But I think the NFL is ahead of the curve in what they're doing, the amount of games they're playing, regular season games that they're playing overseas. And this has been something that Roger Goodell's been banging the drum on for a long time.
What were your impressions of Jaxson Dart in his NFL debut?
I thought he showed a lot of toughness because he took some big hits in that game. I thought he provided energy for the Giants, and they rallied around him. And I think that's the biggest thing. The numbers aren't going to jump off the charts. He threw for about 111 yards. He ran the football well. He gave them that athletic angle that they were looking for. But I think more than anything else, he provided them with energy and somebody that the rest of the team got behind. That game was not won necessarily because of Jaxson Dart. That game was won because they also ran the football and the defense played an outstanding game. And I'll tell you, Jim, what it actually reminded me of, and this probably won't make Giants fans happy, but it's the truth. That game reminded me of what we saw from Brian Daboll's year one, when Daniel Jones was the guy running around and they had Saquon and they were pretty tame with the passing game. They were not going to throw the football all over the field. They tried to protect him. They kept the training wheels on. I thought they did that with Dart yesterday. And that year, they played that way offensively. They were really good defensively, and they made the playoffs. And that seemed like the formula in the game against the Chargers.
Chris, let me throw it to you on this as well, because last week you and I were talking and you were really, really concerned about the Giants' offensive line and, Jaxson Dart being in there too soon in the season. What were your impressions after watching him yesterday?
I was really impressed. I was very surprised in a good way, how he handled himself, the moxie he had. And that was my biggest concern. I didn't want the Giants throwing him in there and ruining this kid's confidence. I really like his attitude. I think he brings something that the Giants have lacked for a long time, and that's a little moxie. And you know what? Between him and Scatabo, I like where they're going from an attitude point of view. The two of them look like they're having fun out there, and that's something the Giants have sorely lacked for a long time. Guys that look like they're having a good time. And for his first debut, I got to give it to him. He did great.
I would agree with you. And I think when you're talking about having fun, that goes to the energy point that I brought up. They brought energy. Now, that's something that other guys can feed off of. That's something his teammates can get behind. That's something even the defense can feed off of. And Brian Daboll needed it. I think you saw him after the game. He's got his head up against Jaxson Dart there and congratulating him. It's a desperate team and a desperate head coach, and they do desperate things. And so they had to turn to the rookie. I think that was the card they had to play. And for 1 week at least, that paid off.
Bill, you referenced Saquon Barkley just a couple of minutes ago. He has less than 240 yards, I think, in these first 4 games. Last year in one game alone, he ran for over 250. How concerned should the Eagles be? Or is there any reason to be concerned about Barkley?
I wouldn't be too concerned yet. They're 4-0. So if they were struggling and Barkley wasn't producing, then I think you have some concern. I thought they used him as a decoy against the Buccaneers, quite frankly, where they didn't give him a lot of carries early on in the game. They tried to throw the football. They had a very big first half offensively, and that went away in the second half, and they kind of had to hang on to the end to get the win. But I think it'll come around. I think this offense is still in transition. Remember, Kellen Moore was the offensive coordinator last year. He's gone. He's the head coach of the Saints. Kevin Patullo's now the OC there. So I do think they're having a few growing pains with that, but I wouldn't be really at the point where I'm having alarm bells going off because the team's still winning. And I think with that offensive line, the running game will shift into gear.
Now the Giants, go back to the Giants a second. Giants,
Sure.
not everything was exactly rosy yesterday because they did lose, their big wideout Malik Neighbors due to an ACL tear that we learned just recently about his ACL tear. But how much of not only the Giants, it seems to be more prevalent in MetLife, but how much in general does the NFL have a turf problem and these injuries that keep popping up? ACLs, MCLs, that sort of thing.
They would tell you that their data and research shows there is not a turf problem. And they will not admit to this being an issue of turf or grass, that it's a 100% injury rate in this sport. And guys get hurt all the time. And we do see that even on grass too. But it's hard for me to be on board with that. I know Odell Beckham Jr. talked about the MetLife turf after that game, and there are plenty of other guys who have complained about it.
Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think it's an issue. I think there's something there. I can't tell you I have the data to back that up. If I did, I would say so. But the NFL is not going to cop to that, and they haven't so far. They've said in their research with their medical team and everything they've done, there has not been a pronounced difference between the amount of injuries or significant knee or leg injuries or ankle injuries suffered on turf as opposed to grass. But just, to go further on that point, the injuries in general, that's really an early theme. We're week 4. Malik Neighbors gone for the year. Joe Burrow gone for most of the year. Nick Bosa gone for the year. A CeeDee Lamb missing significant time. There are big injuries. Joe Alt went down in that game. He's going to miss some time for the Chargers. There are injuries all over the place. And that's one of the big things. I was talking about this off the air actually during my show on Sunday, and that is part of what goes on in the NFL. Yes, there are teams that are far more talented than other teams, but it is a survival of the fittest. And the team that gets to the end has to have some good fortune injury-wise and not suffer so many injuries that they're overwhelmed. We saw the Lions get overwhelmed last season by playoff time, even with a great season they had. So that really does, in the long haul, factor in to who's left standing at the end of the year.
What concerns me about a lot of these injuries that are happening is they're non-contact. It's one thing to have a contact injury. You can see what would happen there, but a lot of these injuries that are happening aren't contact related. And for me, that's a huge red flag.
It is a huge red flag. We've seen those, the Malik Neighbors, he plants and then tries to jump, suffers the injury. Mike Evans, and it wasn't a season-ending injury, but a couple of weeks ago, tries to make a move and he goes down with an injury. Those are scary things that go on, and that's where I think you can go back and have some question about the playing surface, because it's almost like the guy gets caught a little bit. They're not the stitches like it used to be. Go back to like the old vet in Philadelphia where they got the seams and everything. But still, I think it is different than planting in grass and mud and dirt and all those kinds of things and trying to drive off your leg there as opposed to the turf. So I can understand the concern, and I can understand the complaints from guys who have played on it, like Odell Beckham Jr.
While not being a professional athlete in any way, shape, or form, I have played on both the original AstroTurf, which I hated. It was just abysmal, as well as the more recent Field Turf, which feels a lot different. You're running on a cushion, if you will. I don't know if that's the right word or not, but it's a combination of grass and rubber pellets. So there's some, at least it feels as if there's some give to it. But definitely, you plant your foot, and it may not do what you want it to do the way it does on an all grass surface.
The traction is different, and I'm sure from the cleats or the spikes or whatever they use, that's got to be different too when you're playing on a grass field as opposed to when you're playing on field turf. I run on field turf all the time. I know exactly what you're talking about, and your foot can go out from under you when you try to plant and make a move and things like that. So it's definitely not the same feel as running around on grass.
I know a lot of the players, and Chris, you just mentioned about how many injuries have happened at MetLife, but there's been a lot of talk about once the World Cup comes in and it'll be a different surface. A lot of players are hoping, could we leave that one out there, please?
Well, that's the thing. See, I understand their concerns and I understand their complaints, because if I'm a player and I'm concerned about the surface and I see what they're doing for the World Cup, What I'm saying to my owner is, why can't we have that? If you're doing it for a special event that's going to come and go, why can't we have that for the guys you're paying all this money to, so we can play on that and hopefully stay healthier and make it through the year and avoid some of these injuries? I get it.
You can check out Bill along with Steve Torrey. I actually used to work, well, sort of with Steve. Steve was at 1010 Wins up on the 10th floor. I was on the 9th floor.
Okay.
We were dueling sports directors, if you will. He was at 1010 Wins. I was at WNEW-FM. You can check him out as the co-host of Sunday Drive, all 8 hours of the show on SiriusXM, as well as Late Hits, which airs at various times throughout the week. Bill, it's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for your time with us.
Anytime, guys. Thank you so much for having me on.
And you know what we say, if you like what we do, tell a friend. If you hate what we do, tell an enemy. Just please tell somebody.
I'll tell everybody.
Perfect. Love it.
Swendeman, we'll talk next week.
You got it, Jim. And thanks again, Bill.
Thanks so much.